Hi, my name is Sumi Aida and I will present about introduction. DNA extraction. DNA extraction is a crucial step in DNA analysis, especially in fields like ancient DNA and forensic genetics, where samples are often degraded and present in low quantities. Although there have been advancements in extracting DNA from skeletal remains, the boundaries of efficient DNA isolation and recovery are still being explored. Typically, DNA extraction from bone powder involves incubation in a lysis buffer followed by binding the DNA to silica and washing away inhibitors. For the ancient DNA research has focused on developing methods to isolate and retain shorter DNA fragments, which are more abundant in ancient samples. Different extraction protocols, such as Dabney and Laurer methods, have been used in forensic genetics, with the former showing promise for extracting DNA from skeletal remains. For the objective, this study aims to compare the performance of these extraction protocols in extracting DNA from bone samples of varying ages. The study also explores different genotyping methods, including fragment size analysis and sequencing, to assess the performance of the protocols. Additionally, the study investigates the effect of increasing bone powder amounts and combining lysates on DNA yield using the Dabney method.
Next, materials and methodology. Let's take a look at what this article used as a sample. They used total 4 samples in this article, with sample A they collect in Austria, which around 30 years old bones. And for sample B and C, they used 2 medieval bones between 800 and 1500 years old bone, which collected at Volders, Austria. And this last sample is sample D, they collected in Colombia, which is 2000 years old bone. So for the sample preparation, they clean the bowl with scalpel to remove the debris from the surface, and they cut it into the small pieces for milling. And then they wash the bone with sodium hypochlorite, water, ethanol, and shake it at 300 rpm for 15 to 20 minutes. And they dry it overnight under laminar flow and mold it into bone powder using an MM2 ball mill. And then this will produce bone powder, and they will separate it into 500, 150 milligram liquids and subject to 2 different extraction methods. So next is for the extraction. They use 2 extraction method, which first one is they adapted from L'Oreal Journal, which they use 550 milligram of bone powder for this extraction. And the next one is they referring to Dabney Journal for the DNA extraction, and they use 50 and 100 milligram of bone powder sample. So after the extraction, they need to use a quantitative method to achieve the data. So the first one, they use real-time quantitative PCR, which they use a real-time qPCR multiplex based on Techman TFS chemistry. And the next one is they use mtDNA quantification assay using SYBR Green TFS chemistry. And they also use mtDNA massively parallel sequencing. For sequencing libraries, they use Ion Plus Fragment Library Kits TFS with 25 microliter of extracted DNA for all the samples except sample A, because sample A shows higher mtDNA copy number per microliter. They also achieve raw data processes, and the data was checked for the match patterns. They also use nuclear DNA SDR and SNP typing to assess the performance of the different extracts with an MPS-based SNP assay, all samples were analyzed with the AmpliSec Visage basic tool for appearance and ancestry. The DNA extracts were subjected to a pre-library Ampure XP break for cleanup, and this technique used total of 6 microliter that we use for library preparation for most of the samples, except for sample A, because sample A presents higher data DNA quantification results.
A total of 48 DNA extractions from bone and 76 downstream genotyping reactions were performed to fulfill all tests considered in the study. The first results we will discuss are nuclear and mtDNA quantification. In general, larger amounts of input material resulted in higher DNA amounts. Therefore, L'Oreal 500 yielded higher absolute DNA quantification compared to most Dabney protocols. However, the comparison between protocols using such different amount of bone powder input does not reflect the method's efficiency. Therefore, both mtDNA and nuclear DNA quantification results were also normalized by the amount of bone powder used. This showed higher normalized DNA quantification results for the Dabney protocol in all bone specimens. Statistic t-test for sample B found that Dabney 100 mg was significantly different from Dabney 50 mg, indicating the assay's higher efficiency with less bone input. To evaluate the increase of the DNA yield with the Dabney method, alternative Dabney protocol was tested. This result suggests an almost linear gain of DNA with the amount of input bone powder used in parallel assays, which was assessed by performing linear regression analysis for all samples B and C triplicates and compared with the respective theoretical results. Based on the results, no significant difference between lines was observed. Hence, doubling the amount of bone powder in a single Dabney assay turned out to be inefficient. On average, Dabney protocol outperformed Laurel with a 2.2 times higher DNA concentration value. To investigate the level of degradation, an index was determined for the samples and trials by dividing the quantification results from the short empty DNA target by the longer target. All replicates from sample B, C, and D showed a degradation index more than 1, as expected for bone remains with 800 to 1,500 and 2,000 years of age. The results corroborate with studies that explain that the Dabney method can be optimized for shorter DNA fragment recovery. Secondly is empty DNA sequencing. Full coverage for the entire control region was obtained for all samples using the PEC method. Mean read depth position for the control region varied from sample A, B, C, and D. Most of the samples presented red in other regions of the empty genome, thus increasing the possible range for haplotype distinction. The entire control region represents only 6.8% of the empty genome, and all tested samples yielded reads at least covering 15.42% of the empty genome with 3 times coverage. Laurel 500 reached a higher percentage of covered empty genome only for sample A when compared to Dabney method. Both samples B and D showed higher percentages of covered empty genome for the Dabney methods. Extraction trials with 6 times 50 mg showed an increase of 32.8% of covered empty genome, reaching up to 90.8% coverage. This indicates that the protocol iteration provides an efficient method for primer extension capture NPS. Capture-based assay method helps in inferring actual size of the fragments recovered from extraction. Fragment sizes ranging from 35 to 100 BP are visible in the Dabney-based extractions. This higher GC content in shorter fragments has been associated with Dabney extraction. Although higher variation in GC content was observed in shorter reads, there is no clear tendency towards higher GC content that was noted for both methods. However, in the center of the reads, Laurel 500 shows significantly less damage than most other methods for sample B. And damage frequencies seem to be consistently higher for Dabney method, except for C to T transition at 5P. Lastly is nuclear DNA STR typing and SNP sequencing. 3 different kits were used to observe the performance of different methods, which are ESX17, Visage BT, and Forensic. The percentage of cord loci was divided by milligrams of bone powder used to normalize the result. The Dabney result had better normalized performance for all 3 kits. Even though better absolute results are obtained by Laurel 500 when analyzing the earlier extracted samples, improved results from sample B can be obtained by altered Dabney 3 times 50 mg protocol. It showed an increase of 2.3 times more cord loci. Visage BT were proven to have less tolerance to inhibitors as standard CE-based STR typing panel. For the Visage panel, samples B, C, and D show performance increase with extra purification step. However, the clean-up step showed no visible increase in performance for the remaining samples, or even a slight decrease in performance, which can be explained by DNA loss during purification step. Previous work on bone samples had shown forensic to be sensitive to inhibition carryover from bone extraction methods, where optimization has not yet tested. Forensic still underperformed, even though a pre-library purification step was performed for all forensic libraries. This highlights the importance of further optimization of buffers and also other parameters for both MPSEC and forensic library preparation kits. Next, the results from ESX70 were achieved without any pre-purification steps, highlighting the advantages of years of optimization. ESX70 has a similar trend line to Visage BT, with Dabney extracted samples overperformed Laurel samples in the vast majority. Hence, the results of this study agree with previous study that highlight the Dabney method as a good alternative extraction method for very degraded samples and CE-STR typing.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Ainur Syafiqah binti Azmi. Another journal that can be used for support our main journal from Dong Y Yang et al. 1998. It is described a simple method for extracting polymerase chain reaction amplifiable DNA from ancient bones without the use of organic solvent. Bone powders are digested with proteinase K, and the DNA is purified directly using silica-based spin column, which is QIA-QK and QIA gens. The efficiency of this protocol is demonstrated using human bone samples ranging in age from 15 to 5,000 years old. Based on the result, Protocol A yielded pigmented DNA preparation that could not be amplified. Protocol B removed all traces of pigmentation and allowed the samples to be amplified, while Protocol C and D yielded clear DNA solution that were readily amplified. Protocol C and D was using QIA quickie. Based on this observation, it is evident that the QIA quickie columns are effective in removing pigments that often inhibits PCR. So, to conclude, the protocols for ancient DNA extraction should optimize the recovery of the DNA and minimize the impacts of the PCR inhibitors. Since they're using the silica-based column, it helps a lot towards getting the results. There are also another method development for the new methodology to get DNA analysis from the bones, which from Isabel Bloch and Matthias Meyer 2017. In their publication journal, they found a new method that allow for the recovery of even shorter DNA fragments below than 25 dp by using the modified binding buffer. Another one, based on Nadine Rowland et al. 2018, they introduced the adjustment to the DAPNI protocol to optimize the recovery, incubation times, and temperature, and introduce a higher degree of automation, for example, by using the magnetic bead instead of silica columns.
In conclusion, the adoption of new DNA extraction protocols in forensic lab is slower and more rigorous compared to ancient DNA research labs. DAPNI-based extraction has proven efficient for degraded DNA samples, but its limited bone powder input may restrict DNA yield for downstream application. In a study comparing DAPNI and L'Oreal methods, DAPNI-based protocols showed higher efficiency and DNA yields. The DAPNI methods produced shorter fragments but had informative sequences without extraneous DNA. The L'Oreal method yield higher overall DNA amounts, but it is preferred when heavy degradation of sample preservation isn't a concern. An alteration to the DAPNI protocol involving sequential purification of parallel DNA lysis compensates for sample input limitations, allowing higher yield, especially for severely degraded DNA.